And everybody sat there and they all looked scared. And then it rang again, and I realized it was mine, in my purse. So thank you for turning over your cell phones. Teachers are not perfect. I was chasing. They had me. Okay. I didn't read any of the Persephone poems last hour. We just didn't get around to them. So I'm going to start by reading some of the Persephone poems, which are poems in the first section of the book. And Persephone, as you probably remember the story, is the daughter of Demeter. This is Greek mythology, and she's out in the field one day picking flowers, having a lovely time, and Hades comes along. He's the bad boy. I think she looks pretty cool, and he's lonely, and he doesn't have a partner down there in the underworld, and so he kidnaps her and he takes her to the underworld. And when her mother discovers she's gone, everything dries up, freezes up, nothing grows, because Demeter's the grain goddess, and so she controls the natural world and the growing of the fruits and the flowers and so on and so forth. And so when she goes into mourning for the abduction of her daughter, everything just dies. And the gods, particularly Zeus, they get concerned about this, because if the grapes don't grow and if the grain doesn't grow, people are not going to be able to harvest it, and if they can't harvest it, they're not going to be able to make their sacrifices to the gods. And so Zeus is not cool with this, and so he sends a couple of emissaries to Hades and says, look, you've got to let the girl go. Hades doesn't want to, of course, but finally he's persuaded to. And but with conditions. She has to show up for 6 months of the year, so she's got to go back. So she doesn't get to stay in the upper world year-round. And so it explains, an easy way of thinking about it is our seasons. She comes back in the spring, things start to grow. Her mother allows the trees to bloom and the flowers to grow and the fruit to grow and so on and so forth. And then in the fall, she goes back to Hades and everything dies. So that's the myth. I was particularly interested in looking at Persephone from the perspective of not being a victim. And so I thought, well, maybe when she goes to Hades, she actually has a good time. Maybe it's not so bad down there. When she married Hades, when she became his consort, she did become queen of the underworld. I mean, up here she was just sort of a frivolous girl floating around, picking flowers, living with her mother. Something to think about. So, for me, the myth became more complex. And the more I thought about it, the more complex it got. And then I began to see Persephone or think of Persephone in more contemporary settings. I'm going to read the second poem, which is on page 7, Persephone in Hades, because that talks about the time that she spends in the underworld. And then maybe I'll read a couple more where I put her in a more contemporary setting. Persephone in Hades. It's a girl's job to go to Hades. How he'd wake her in the dark, his winter need, flesh on flesh for warmth. The dog came every morning, stood by their bed, a trinity of heads, birth, death, and in between, ears, petals, paw, gone, now coming. The girl reached, the dog bowed, said the girl was holy, a visitor from another kingdom, said it was she who must lift up every spring and lay the winter dark down. Without her, only oblivion. Said she must give thanks for all of it. Honey cakes for the god, a bone for the bitch dog, her dry dugs, slippery tongue, It begins as length of light. Sun ascending already, days like the uncoiling rose stretched away from winter sleep, story, and she that for so long was nothing. First breath of bubbled air, the world enticing love, tree budding bareness, branch to shoulder, elbow, such whiteness each morning anticipated. The opening, a ladder of stars. Now, 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 now. And I think I'll read the first poem. One of the things about writing, and particularly writing poetry, although I certainly think it's true in other genres, you know, you start off thinking you're writing about one thing and you find out, oh, it's really about all these other things too. So when sometimes, you know, and it's fairly common, you know, people will say, you know, I don't understand contemporary poetry. I don't know what it's about. I don't get it. And sometimes that's because we're looking for too literal a story, too much of a straight line, and that's not the way life is. Life is complicated. Life is full of paradoxes. Things are not black and white. Maybe your math test is black and white. Although in pure mathematics, things are not black and white. So to come back to talking about Persephone, she's a complex character for me. The idea of being abducted, of course, is terrible. Okay. So this poem deals with that issue of abduction, and it also deals with an attraction for danger, and I think, you know, a lot of us feel attracted to dangerous situations. It's called, this is Persephone's Return, so this is really a spring, this is a spring poem. Where has she been, that girl? Back from her winter travels with him, Prince of Darkness, outlaw. How could she not love him? Runic smile, muscled leather vest, and when she arched her leg, like a question mark, over the saddle seat behind him, encircled his sweat with her swan arms, they exploded. Spacecraft, booster rocket falling away as they tore into deep space. But today, lilacs, she's back with us. Mother's Day, Demeter out in the garden, looking in spite of her flowery dress, bent and old. What is it that propels the girl toward dark? And the man who held her, he wants. A single bird swoops low over the river where the crime scene van is parked beside a cop car. They are down in the reeds and muck of the riverbank looking for clues. A body. Demeter can tell them there has been a crime here. So I don't read that poem anymore without thinking of one of the things that always makes me think of is the recent incidents of domestic violence. Mandy Matuba, certainly others. So there is that element. Danger is dangerous, attractive, but dangerous. Okay, so then the more I thought about Persephone, the more I thought, oh, you know, every place I look, there she is, there she is. So she became a symbol for me of young woman wanting to have a full life, wanting to know herself completely. And so this is called Minnesota at the State Fair. Or this is called At the State Fair. At the Minnesota State Fair, I'm sorry. I'm getting confused here. At the Minnesota State Fair. So it's imagining, I went to the State Fair, and of course it's August and it's hot, and you know, it's the culmination of the growing year, and they've got all those animals there, and they do the judging, and then, you know, all the animals are, not all of them, but a lot of them are sold, and off they go to become breeding stock or to be butchered. So that idea of completion or fullness. And so I wrote this poem. At the Minnesota State Fair, all the girls want to be Persephone. End of summer, barns full of sows, cows, all brought by grain and grass and sun to fullness. They are destined for the highest bidder. An old bandy-legged farmer, cloven boots, he'll staple his earrings to their fluted ears, lead them onto a silver ferry, drive home, breed or butcher. Outside the demonstration barns, young men take off their cowboy shirts. It's getting hot. Pretty bare bones, boots, 10-gallon hats, hip-hung jeans on butterfly pelvis, catch at girls passing by. The animals wait, meditate, breath, stillness. The sow in her pen sees the white wind coming, listens for the little man to sing out her name. So the book is divided into sections. And one of the sections are poems about Iceland, time that I spent visiting Iceland several years ago. I had a friend, the Minnesota writer Bill Holm, who had a house there, and I went and stayed with him, and then drove around the island on the ring road. Has anybody been to Iceland? We should go. Oh yes, you've been. Yeah.
Only to the airport.
Only to the airport.
And I got to go outside of the airport maybe a mile.
Okay. Did you go to the Blue Lagoon?
I wish.
Oh, okay. Because a lot of people will stop at the airport, or if they have a layover there, and they go. You can go to the Blue Lagoon, which is the hot springs. Actually, the Blue Lagoon is going to appear in this poem I'm going to read. But to really see Iceland, you got to get out in the countryside. Reykjavik is fine, and there's lots of partying in Reykjavik, and lots of good music and young people. And I was there in June, 24-hour daylight. So on the weekends, partying was nonstop in Reykjavik. It was 24 hours, and you know, they wouldn't start until midnight, maybe, and then they just would party. I didn't, but these were stories I heard. And then I went out early the next morning, Sunday morning, and the street sweepers are out, and they're just sweeping up all the stuff from the night before, the bottles, the empty thises, the cups, the so on and so forth. So it's known as quite a, during the midnight sun, quite a party city. Of course, the other hand, you go in January and they have like 4 hours of daylight. And I always wanted to go back in the winter to see what it'd be really like. But I haven't yet, so I was there in June. So this is a poem called The Skull. It's on page 65. And after visiting with my friend Bill for a while, I drove by myself on the ring road in a little rented Yaris. And I would stop. I was taking a lot of pictures, and And there's sheep all over Iceland. They cross the roads. You have to be careful on the highways because they'll be just walk across in front of your car, and so they're not necessarily always, they're not fenced in often. And so I stopped and found a skull, a sheep skull. And so this is the story of that skull. At the edge of the North Atlantic, beside Iceland's Ring Road, I find the sheep skull. I pose it for photos by saxifrage and butterwort, and by the pink toes of wild thyme. Then I leave it, walk to my car, then turn around and go back. The skull becomes a perfect traveling companion, a partner in the passenger seat of my small rented Yaris. She doesn't say much, so it's almost like being alone, but not quite. I photograph her at the glacier's edge and at the tiny church at Skaftafell. We drive through miles of black lava. She sees the spearmint green icebergs dip under the Jokalusa Bridge, river bridge. She visits the Blue Lagoon, mixes with a crowd of Japanese tourists, wants her own terry cloth robe. After a long day of travel, she rests her head on a blue geothermal pipe, hot artery from the heart. I bring her into my last hotel room. She watches me over breakfast of toast and rhubarb jam. Finally, we say goodbye outside the airport. I can't take her with me, no matter how much I have fallen for her dreamy eye sockets, her toothy, innocent grin. I'm going to read this one from Iceland. You know, Iceland is all lava and volcanoes and extinct volcanoes and hot pots that still bubble up and by the side of the road, and there's just, you know, a tremendous amount of energy, and every little town has its own pool, which is, the water is so clean and so clear because they you know, just bring it up from underground. They don't even, you have to put chlorine in it. I mean, it's just hardly, you know, there's just virtually no chemicals in the pool water. And then they, when I first got there, Bill took us to, just outside Reykjavik, and we stopped to swim, where there were hot tubs, and there were a whole series of hot tubs, and they were identified by the temperature. So you could have, you know, 80 degrees, 90 degrees, 100 degrees, 120 degrees. It's just great. So the landscape, I went to see the landscape, and it was marvelous. And so this poem has to do with hiking and climbing an extinct volcano. So you climb up, and then you know, the caldera is the bowl, and I climbed up so that I could see down into the caldera. Climbing the Verschall mountain. All things want to live. The tiny juniper, the wild pink thyme, the pair of teal that circle the lava field. I walk from Dimmuborgir to Verschall through pillars of lava, then start straight up the mountain of black sand. My heart beats a tattoo in my chest. I stop for breath, then go on, then stop again. I am the old woman climbing to the crater to look down into the mixing bowl of the caldera. At the top, where it seems nothing should grow, There are white flowers in the lava and soft mounds of moss-like skullcaps on rock. All things want to live. The biting midges want to live, and the big bumblebee flirting from flower to flower. My heart continues to thump like someone stepping around a puddle on the way to her execution. It occurs to me that I might die, and I think, yes, I will, but probably not today. The hike back seems easier and shorter, although I know it's not. I add 3 rocks to a cairn, 2 for going out and 1 to come back. And then it begins to rain. Okay. I read a couple of poems from the second section, which are poems about family, maybe relationships. I'll read this one. It's called Virginity. It's on page 31. It's a poem about molestation. The man in the dark wool Speedo touched between her legs as he lifted her onto the dock at Candlewood Lake. Her father, swimming with her, never guessed, and she stayed silent. Riding bareback, she was the wishbone on the fulcrum of her horse, his spine a flyway over belly and heart, a span of breaths, and then years and years of longing. So we talk about writing poems. This is a poem in 2 parts, but with an asterisk between the parts, which suggests a significant shift in time, shift in tone. So it's not just a stanza division. And sometimes when you can't see it, when I'm reading it out loud, you don't necessarily get that. I'm getting the high sign back there, so a few more minutes and then we'll...
Questions?
Questions now? Who has questions? Yes, sir.
Why did you choose the stuff you invested in?
You know, I don't think I chose them. I think they chose me. I mean, why do we choose
They
anything?
want to show a father and daughter relationship. I'm sorry.
A mother and daughter relationship? Well, you know, I knew the story. I mean, I've known the story for years and years and years. I've not used a lot of Greek myth in my work. I've not felt, very closely associated to Greek myth. I know the stories because I have read literature, and you have to, know the Greek myths and other myths too, not just Greek myths. I just started writing about her. When I write, I have to say this because this is important. Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, who, of course, wrote wonderful books, including one that said, I write to find out what I think. He didn't say, I think something and then I write about it. He said, I write to find out what I think. So that idea of not knowing what you're going to be writing about, particularly when it has to do with more creative writing. Now, if you're writing a research paper on World War II, you know what you're writing about, but to sit down and write a poem, often I won't know what I'm going to write about. And often where I start, I don't end up. There's a wonderful book about writing poetry. Some of you may know it, by Richard Hugo, called The Triggering Town. And Hugo's idea, he taught writing for many years at the University of Montana, was that there's the trigger or the catalyst that begins the poem, but the real subject is underneath that. And so you have to go beyond the trigger to find out what it is you really are concerned about. So the Persephone poems, I really don't know what more to say about that. I just began to see her everywhere, I guess. Yeah.
Did your poem Virginia, where did you get that from? Was it something personal, or did you just write it off?
Virginity?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I remember. Yeah.
When you read your poem, Disambiguation, in class,
Disambiguation.
you actually you answered this question.
No, I did. I found out.
Because it's very strangely laid out.
It
I was
is.
just wondering why you did that.
Well, what page?
41.
41, yeah. Disambiguation was an experiment for me, and so the structure is experimental. The subject matter, the content is also experimental, but the structure is very, very experimental. I wrote Disambiguation after, I Googling and looking at something, well, I guess it was cardinals. Yeah, it was cardinals. I wanted to know something about cardinals. Wikipedia, even though often you are told not to use Wikipedia for research, it can be very helpful in some instances. Like, you want to know the dates of the First World War. Wikipedia is your place to go. And I was trying to find out something about the bird, cardinals. And so I went to Wikipedia and I went into the entry on cardinals, and I noticed up at the top was talking about this disambiguation, the disambiguation pages, and I thought, ooh, what is that? I didn't even know it was a word. Disambiguate, is that a word? I don't know. So I got very curious about disambiguation. And of course, what it means is, and what Wikipedia is alerting us to, is that there are different meanings for cardinals. And so if you really want to thoroughly explore the word cardinal, or the sign cardinal, you have to look at all the possible meanings. And so you're going to check those disambiguation pages. So I thought, well, that's interesting, and it's interesting to think of how easy it is to get confused about language. So the poem really has to do with looking at the many different meanings of cardinals, and they all appear in this poem. Where there are italics, those are lines that I've taken from Wikipedia or from, well, the quote comes from Mozilla. I think in the notes in back I probably took quotes from some other sources too. Just Wikipedia and Mozilla. So in the poem I was trying to bring together these disparate subjects, and so the structure kind of represents that dissonance of the multiple meanings of the word. Other questions? No questions. Questions. Well, I'm going to read another poem, and then maybe we'll look at some of your questions. So this is the one that's on the opposite page to virginity. It's on page 30. Life Underwater. I think it's pretty. I need to explain it. Life underwater. She swims the wide pool with her mother, dead years now. They look down through new, no fog goggles, a black stripe demarcating the lane. The man on the left torpedoes by with big black flippers. He knows human feet are not sufficient in this world. On the other side, a pregnant half-moon-bellied woman laps at good speed. She is swimming for two. The baby suspended in water, inside a body suspended in water. In this world, everything is clear, simple. The body does not struggle to stay upright. There is no wind, and everything stays the same, or nearly so. So as reading that, I was thinking, I do have, I am I grew up on the East Coast, so I spent a lot of time at the beach. Not that we don't have beaches here, we have beaches here. But we're in the water every day. And sometimes I think, it is a much more soothing element. I was thinking about my father, who died many years ago of cancer, and toward the end, the only time he felt good was when he was, our neighbors had a pool in their backyard. And the only time he really got any relief was when he was in the water. And I think that's because it takes the pressure that gravity puts on our bodies off the body, and so it eased him in some way. And so that idea of water being a very nurturing kind of environment has always been something that fascinated me, and the idea of being weightless also. So I'm going to read Lake Nokomis. That's on page 37, which also has to do with being at the beach, this time at Lake Nokomis. The lovers, he 300 pounds, she maybe 250, discover they are weightless in the water. Beaming, they take turns carrying each other within the small confines laid out for swimming. He lifts and cradles her as if she were a delicate parcel of pastry wrapped and tied with string, which he is conveying home for a bedtime treat. Thick rope, punctuated with floats like big white marshmallows, contain their sweetness. From the sand, a harried mother calls to her splashing children, and muscled men buck and dive, ropes of ponytails down their backs, gold earrings and crosses and tattoos of the blue Virgin de Guadalupe. It's Saturday. We've worked hard for the bosses all week to have this day of sun and splashing water. Swallows skim the grass. Bikini girls go by pushing the future. It sleeps or balls. Over our heads, jets take off, gain altitude, sweep over the beach as if they would scoop us all up, as if we too were weightless. Small faces pressed at oval windows. Questions or comments? Or yes.
So obviously we know that you like to write, but is there anything else that you really enjoy that really doesn't have anything to do with writing?
Swimming? I like lots of things, yeah. Well, I love to write. I am, almost as, sometimes a tough decision whether I'm going to write or read. I love to read. I'm never happier than when I'm reading something. And I don't read, I read poetry, but I read lots of other things too. And what I really enjoy reading are mysteries. I love mysteries. So, read a lot of mysteries. And lately I've been reading mysteries that were written by people who live in countries other than the U.S. So the Scandinavians, well, ever since, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But there's a whole bunch of Scandinavian mystery writers, including a lot of women who are really good. So I've been reading them, and I pick up these books secondhand. I like to go to secondhand stores and look and find stuff, and just find stuff that I've never heard of before. Mysteries set in South Africa. I read a mystery that was set in Iceland, written by an Icelandic writer. I just finished a mystery that actually was written by somebody who lived in the Faroe Islands, which are the islands off the coast of Scotland, and set the mystery there. Fascinating. So, you get the mystery, but you also get the landscape and the scenery, so it's kind of like reading about travel too, so I like that. Yeah. Yes?
Could you read Persephone at the Spa?
Persephone at the Spa, sure. Yeah. Okay. See if there's anything I want to. Okay. I think it's pretty explanatory. And also, this would be an end of summer, late summer, early fall poem for Persephone. Persephone at the Spa. She strips down to a sheet. Everything white except fleshy, putty cherubs on the painted ceiling. A smocked woman says, "You are dry, dry." Old skin needing to be sloughed, needing exfoliation, hot oil, abrasion, and then the anointing of creams. Like volcanic magma rises, the layer of summer bronze lifts, scraped off to reveal another layer, and then another. Sediment, fossilized sandstone, your face a monument to the wear of love and sex and grief. And then the burning, after the burning of summer, your mother's hot breath. You prepare for him again. Moist cotton patches, sucking light over startled eyes. The estheologist says, hydrate, hydrate, applies, lang, lang. Love aphrodisiac for the wedding, the winter dark. Why that one?
I was considering this one in class, and I've always been a fan of Greek mythology, and I like the two parts of the thoughts of Persephone. Either that she hates going down to him, or another part that she actually loves him.
Exactly.
So this was her being prepared.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah. You're waving.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
When gathering, when gathering or curating of both the poems, such as you have, and some are on a very personal level, is there ever a line that you choose not to cross? Does anything go in the book like this?
That's a good question. My parents, of course, are both deceased now. I might not have published that virginity poem if my father was still alive, since he is the father in the poem. But I can't think of, because I've been publishing regularly since the 70s. I can't really think of anything that I've censored from my work because I was concerned about family. It may be that I censor before I write and I'm not thinking about it. I did, my mother lived for quite a while, quite a long time, and she shows up in a lot of poems, not just in this book, but in other books, from the very beginning in my writing, she shows up. And I've always sent her the books, and she would never say anything, and except, oh yeah, I got your book, or something like that, anyway. And so she came to visit me once, and we went to a reading that I was giving. So I thought, oh, this is cool, my mom will get to see me read. Whoa, this is really cool, you know? So she did, and then we left, and we got in the car. She didn't say anything. And so finally I turned to her and I said, well, what did you think? And she said, sometimes you're too deep for me. And that was it. That was it. That was the entire comment. Okay, Mom. So she just didn't want to talk about it. But I think that that's a good question, and that's something that, I always tell, I work with students, I teach writing at Augsburg, and, don't write something that you're uncomfortable sharing. I'm comfortable sharing the story about virginity now, maybe 30 years ago. Other questions? And that sharing, that doesn't go just for poetry, but if you're writing creative nonfiction, you're writing memoir, you gotta feel comfortable. But you also want to tell your story. That's important. I'm going to read one more poem for Steve. We talked about our mutual friend.
Scott.
Scott.
I get that all the time.
I had it fixed in my head. Scott. A mutual friend and someone that we both hold near and dear to us. And so this is a poem that I wrote about him. The friend had a heart transplant many years ago, and so the poem has to do with that experience. It's called The Transplant for Ron Goward. When you turn to me, my heart opens to receive the gift, like the heart of the young North Dakota man that was cut out lovingly, surgically precise, and slipped into the empty birdcage of our friend's chest and set to beating again. Whose face did this heart love? In our friend's hospital sleep, does he dream of her now? See her coming down the French row? Her warm thighs and breasts making the heart beat faster, making it swell and fly? When you turn to me, all the pigeons of the world wheel and soar, and I open like the great cave, like love, death. When you turn your hands on my heart, holding me, a shell to your chest, she appears. The world tumbles over and over. I lift one languid arm, the surgeon's knife, sliding into love. Thank you. What a great poem.
Just a couple of announcements. If you'd like to get your book signed, you can come up and Cary will be signing books. We'll start the line right here and run it this direction. As you leave, please stop by and talk to Tracy Youngblom Turner. She has information about our creative writing degrees. And stop and get your attendance certificate from one of the English faculty if you need that. Thank you so much for coming, and please pay attention for next semester's writers. We're going to be having a graphic novelist running Tyler Page.